Right, this looks like everyone. These wonderful slides and my voice will hopefully be successfully recorded. We did a small test of it earlier. Let's see if it actually works. The later display and presentation on my selfish plug for my own selfless website called myworldofit.net. Please go visit it and like everything you see on it. It's only got a like button, it doesn't have a dislike button. It doesn't have a heart button or anything else like that. For the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about the magical world of Windows Server Core and PowerShell. Now, the first small question is, please raise your hand if you attended the presentation that I did at Queen's College a couple of months ago. That's really good, because if you attended that, you would be dead bored by the end of this presentation, because it's pretty much everything from there. So I'm James Preston from the Queen's College, University of Oxford. I'm the systems officer at the college, which basically means I don't deal with humans. I talk to machines all day, which might come across in this presentation. A quick overview of what goes on at the college. We have 3 full-time staff. We run pretty much Microsoft for everything, with the exception of 2 Linux servers, which we don't talk about. We're going to be discussing mainly PowerShell, but a couple of the other free tools that you can use to manage Windows Server Core. Further question for hands up, please. Hands up if you are using Server Core in any form in your environment at the moment. That's like 4 people. Okay, that's really good. Server Core is a headless version of Windows Server, with the exception of a command prompt and a couple of other bits and bobs Microsoft stuck in there. My goal for this presentation is to make you not afraid of using it. If you already use Linux servers, in particular you like using command lines and stuff, you should already be a little less afraid of it than those of you who are used to using GUIs exclusively. So all these wonderful tools up there effectively allow you to manage Server Core. PowerShell, the one that we're focusing on, allows you to do pretty much everything that you could want to do with Windows servers at the moment, along with a load of other things. So it's extensible in that it can send emails. We like email notifications. You can use it to talk direct to your SQL servers with TSQL. You can use it to modify text files, in particular CSVs, HTML files. It likes anything that's really nice and text-based. You can use it to install roles and features on your server. You just choose which one you want. That can be from a GUI-based interface, or you can do it from the command line exclusively. We use it to do a lot of parsing of CSV files and kick out HTML reports as well, which makes life really simple. For those of you in Oxford, we use it to manage the Simper mailing list system. And I've just had word from the chap that runs the Simper mailing list system in Oxford that they've now made it so I can talk to the whitelisting feature as well through the API, which means we can programmatically manage the whitelist feature as well, thereby making everyone's lives easier. HPE, who are here today, their Aruba line of switches have a fantastic RESTful API built into them as well. And so you can use PowerShell to manage your network switches. Forget about all that time spent in SSH sessions or plugging in with a console cable. Let's just manage it with a nice common command line infrastructure. PowerShell can be used both interactively and non-interactively, so you can get it to ask you a question for you to plug in some text to or point it at a file, or you can just say, run this script at 7:30 every morning. We do both, would you believe it? So those of you who have some form of familiarity with PowerShell already, you might have heard of desired state configuration, or DSC, and also PowerShell version 6. So to address the small pilot and the large titan in the room, desired state configuration, we're not going to talk about that. The way I see DSC is if you are running 1,000 servers, 100 of those are SQL servers, another 100 of those are web servers. Fantastic. Use DSC. It's designed to manage large quantities of servers that do pretty much the same thing. Fantastic. In our environment, we run about 26 virtual machines, and it really isn't suitable for us at Queen's as a small college. PowerShell version 6 came out a couple of months ago. When asked, Microsoft said, for Windows Server administrators, there are only 2 real things that make this better than the current release of PowerShell. It's open source and Yeah, it's open source. That's good. Really good thing. PowerShell version 6. We're not going to talk about that too much at the moment. It can run side by side what you might encounter as the normal version of PowerShell. So after that small introduction, let's deploy a Windows Server 2016 core machine. So like I was saying, you've got two major kind of forms that Windows Server comes in these days. Core, headless, and with the GUI. Now the GUI just gives you the management tools that you can also just run on your normal Windows 10 computer. So let's get rid of that and just use Core instead. With a small caveat, there are some features, some of them really useful as well, that Microsoft has not baked into Server Core yet. Windows Server 2019 was announced a couple of days ago, and in turn meant that I had to rewrite a large quantity of this presentation. Thanks, Microsoft. Very busy on Thursday doing that. So to deploy Server Core, it really is the simple difference between selecting Windows Server 2016 Data Center Desktop Experience. And instead of selecting Desktop Experience, just select the one that says Windows Server 2016. This is what you would see if you just plugged the CD into your server or ISO into a virtual machine. You accept the terms and conditions of the licensing agreement. You say, please stick it on this 127 gigabyte drive, and you wait for it to install. And once it's done, you set your administrator password and you're away. It's exactly the same as deploying any other version of Windows Server. No difference there. And of course, you can use other tools to deploy it. So we use the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit as an absolutely fantastic way to deploy operating systems, not only into virtual machines, but onto real hardware as well. So the other little thing is Windows Server Core, or Windows Server as we call it now. So this is Microsoft's semi-annual channel. So just as we have with Windows 10, you've got the long-term support release. That is effectively like Windows Server 2016. That's got 5 years of mainstream support, 5 years of extended support. The semi-annual channel of Windows Server, so if you like updating your servers every 18 months. No? Okay. You can use the semi-annual channel. The current release is Windows Server 1709. This only comes in a core edition. And because of that, it has a smaller disk image. It boots faster as well. It includes the very latest features from Microsoft. The idea being that every 6 months or every 18 months or whatever you want to run with, you can update to the very latest edition of Windows Server and get all the new features which Microsoft have kicked out with it. Unfortunately, the installation is pretty much the same. However, note that instead of having a desktop with a GUI version or anything like that, you've only got Server Standard, you've only got Server Data Center. You only have the core option. Now, Windows Server 2019, when it was announced, Microsoft have said, yeah, this is our long-term support release, 5 years, then another 5 years. It's going to come with the GUI. So that at least means for the next 10 years, we can still continue to use GUI server management tools on Windows Server with a desktop experience. Fantastic. But who's to say not in the future that Microsoft might kill that version and we would only be left with Server Core? It's for that reason that I would suggest, if you're not already, start to learn PowerShell. Start to learn a method of administering your servers remotely instead of using the GUI versions. From there, exactly the same as the previous release as well. You say, I'm going to put it on this disk. It starts to install. It's got a slightly different font. You set your administrator password and you're away. So what about the initial configuration? Our server has been deployed. We now want to change its host name, set an IP address, perhaps join it to a domain. We can do this with PowerShell, or if you want something that's very text-based, I like this, you can use something called sconfig. Type sconfig into the command line prompt, and you get this fantastic little interface. This allows you to set common settings on your server, be that change the host name, join it to a domain, say if you want it to install Windows updates or not, change the date, time, configure an IP address. So by way of example, if you were to press number 2 and then press enter, you can set the host name for the server. You're prompted, do you want to restart it? And fantastic, your server is now running on the new host name. Equally so, if you want to set an IP address, press number 8. Select the interface that you want to configure. plug in an IP address for it, plug in a DNS address server for it, your default gateway and your subnet mask, all that fantastic stuff. Just plug it straight in. Now, you were promised some PowerShell, so let's actually show you some PowerShell. That would be really nice. You can also use PowerShell to configure things like the DNS server address on this computer. From server core, because you can't go to the start button and then type PowerShell and press run, you go Control-Alt-Delete, use the up-down arrow keys on this little interface, which you can see at the top left there. Select Task Manager, hit Enter, go to File, go to Create New Task, type PowerShell, and there's your PowerShell prompt. Absolutely fantastic. And here we've got a couple of little commands which you can then run to set the DNS address on that server to be its own local host. So we're going to set this server up as an Active Directory domain controller. We've had our first little bit of PowerShell. Let's do some more. So PowerShell works on the notion of verb noun. So the verb is going to be get or new or remove or set. So it makes it nice and easy to discover your commands. And then the noun is going to be something like AD user or AD forest or AD computer or CSV or HTML, something like that. That's a small example of how to do this with get Windows feature. So these are all features you can install on server core. The problem is it blasted through that list so quickly and you could spend all day scrolling up and down and we'd never really find what we were after. So let's filter it down a little bit. How about we put type in there, put where object, minus sign property, name, like AD. Some marks around it. And what it's then provided us with a list of is all the AD features that were kicked out by get Windows feature. So you've got this notion of the pipeline, feeding commands and their results into other commands. Now, the nice thing about PowerShell is it's not just passing text here. Each of those lines there is an object. Each of those things has more data inside there. So you've not just got display name, but name and install state, all nice and available. We can go and install those. But there will be other data hidden behind there. Perhaps it'll say, does this require a reboot or not? And there are ways that you can expose those extra bits of data. Let's go further and say, okay, we want the one which is AD domain services. So we're going to change our filter to have an equals instead of a like. And this is just one Windows feature that we can install on our server. So we want to set up Active Directory domain services. So let's take this command now and type to install Windows feature with a little bit at the end that says include management tools. And this also makes the server able to use PowerShell to the roles that's installed on it. And it'll go off and install your service. Now, the fantastic thing about this is these PowerShell commands persist across versions of Windows. So if you set up a Windows Server 2012 machine with Active Directory domain services, and a couple of years later you want to do the same with Windows Server 2016, you take out your old guide on how you did it, you paste it in, and it's going to work. There are a small number of breaking changes, of course, over the course of the years, but most of the time, they're not going to affect you, unless you go to PowerShell v6, which is a completely different thing and we'll ignore for the time being. So now that we've got the feature installed, let's actually promote this server to be our first main. A single line, install, our verb, adds-forest, hyphen, domain name, and we're going to use kings.ox.ac.uk. There's no King's College. This is our demo college. It's going to be fantastic. And off it goes to install this server or set this server up as our first domain. If you're in an environment where you are regularly setting up Windows servers, so for example, I know it's not really going to apply to us, but if you are some managed service provider, and if you were deploying 100 new Windows forests each month, you would set these kind of commands up, you would have them in your runbook, you would just say go, and you'd have a nice, consistent Windows Server infrastructure every time. No clicking through GUIs and, oh, what does this button do? I'm going to press this one today. Let's see what it does differently. Just nice, consistent environments, which is really what we want. So once it's gone and configured that server as its first domain controller, it goes and reboots. See the two lines, the top one's an overflow, that we would need to configure this one server as a domain controller. Now we've actually got a get Windows feature in there because we've used that to discover the feature that we're going to install. We could make that a whole lot simpler and just put install Windows feature, include management tools, and then the name of the feature. So we could make that two really nice short lines, and we've already configured Active Directory domain services. Is that good and useful? Yeah, there we go, fantastic. PowerShell is all about making things consistent and repeatable. GUIs encourage people to click on things. We don't want to do that. Make things work nice and consistently. You can tell that I work with machines, not people. Yes. So how about administering these things? So remote server administration tools, if you're not using already, please go and download it. It is the GUI management tools that can go on your Windows client computers to manage your servers, and by some extent, other clients as well. Now, as well as providing the GUI tools, it also installs on your computer all of the PowerShell modules which are used to administer your computers as well. So, to do this, head to the Microsoft website for Remote Server Administration Tools, select Windows 10 if you're running Windows Server 2016, 8.1 if you're running Windows Server 2012 R2, and Windows 8 if you're running Server 2012. They're backwards compatible as well. So if you're running Windows 10 on your client computer, you can go and administer a Windows Server 2008 machine. Please don't. Windows Server 2008 is end of life. Stop doing that. You select the appropriate tools for your computer, be it 32-bit, 64-bit, but also the Windows build that you're on. Be careful of the build for Windows 1709. Microsoft forgot to include the DNS management tools. Thanks, Microsoft. Oh well. And it installs as Windows Update on your computers. Once you've got that, you've got all these fantastic GUI management tools that you can run on your client computers to manage pretty much anything you have administrative right to. Be that DHCP, AD, group policy, print servers. Yeah, print servers. The very next thing to do on our brand new domain is enable the running of scripts. PowerShell is completely useless unless you enable the running of scripts. So you can configure a group policy. So on our Windows 10 client computer, you head to Group Policy Management Console, create a new policy, right-click, edit. Yeah, we know this stuff, don't we? Policies, administrative templates, Windows components, Windows PowerShell. Come on, click on it. There we go. And turn on script execution. I would typically say go allow local scripts and remote signed scripts. This means any script which is actually stored on your computer has been unblocked. There's an unblocking process. Will be able to run on that computer. Some people are like, well, James, we've just turned off surely an important security feature. Well, not really, because Windows PowerShell will only ever execute administrative commands if you have administrative rights on that computer. Just by turning on scripts doesn't overly make PowerShell dangerous. What is dangerous, though, is when malware goes and uses PowerShell to download something off the internet that's malicious. Well, in the grand scheme of things, we should be using technologies like InterceptX and other things like that, which are your next generation security products, to block those malicious downloads in the first place. We shouldn't be breaking our computers by disabling a fantastic feature of them that allows us to administer them in a nice, consistent manner. To use other tools to prevent malicious scripts from executing. The next thing to do is if you're still running on Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1 or something like that, go and download the very latest version of PowerShell for your clients. The same applies for your servers as well. If you're running Server 2008 R2, 2012 R2, head onto the PowerShell website, grab the latest copy of what's called the Windows Management Framework, and install that on your servers. You need or should be running PowerShell version 5.1. That has loads of fantastic features in it compared to versions 2, 3, and 4, which you'll find on earlier client releases. We're not concerning ourselves with PowerShell v6. Please don't concern yourself with that immediately. So the very next thing to do is concern yourselves with remoting. Again, there is very little point in using PowerShell unless you can use it to remotely control your servers. Now, Windows Server has what's called WSMan enabled on it by default. And if it's in a domain or a private network, any client will be able to talk to it. And if it's in a public network, so your coffee shops and such like, not that you should be putting servers into coffee shops, it'll only respond to requests from its local subnet. Windows client releases don't have remoting turned on by default. If you want to remotely manage your clients, it's a good idea. You have to turn it on. Again, via group policy, there's another little couple of buttons that you can push to do that. What we typically do for our clients is we'll send a PowerShell script, store it somewhere on the drive on that computer, and then use Task Manager or something similar to that to actually execute the scripts instead of remoting them. Our servers, though, because we can monitor them a little bit easier, remoting is turned on by default. Now, if you did come to my last presentation on PowerShell up at Queen's College back in December, I would have shown you something fantastic called PowerShell ISE. Well, that's dead. We don't use that anymore as of Thursday. Forget about it. We now use what's called Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a cross-platform, open source kind of thing that will run on your Mac and it will run on your PC and it will run on some Linux boxes. And not only can it be used to manage PowerShell and create PowerShell scripts, but it can also be used to do Python and other things which I don't pretend to understand. Install it. It's an MSI, so you can quite easily deploy that as well. It'll then very quickly ask you, please go and install Git on your computer. It even provides the link to it. Who remembers Microsoft technology in the past where it said, by the way, you need to install Visual Studio C++ Redistributed 2005 update 37, and then not provide a link on where to actually get it. This is really nice. It provides the link too. Once you've done that, head to the extensions tab, and there are extensions for all kinds of crazy stuff. I saw one that will turn it to different colors, one that will put a sheep on it somewhere, and oh, there's loads of stuff for it. Go to extensions and stick the PowerShell extension into there. Once it installs, hit the reload button and then wait. Seriously, go get a cup of coffee or tea or orange juice or whatever it is that you like to drink and wait. Because for the next couple of minutes, it'll be extracting itself onto the computer and it'll be enabling IntelliSense. It will be scanning all the modules that are already in there. It'll just be doing stuff. So just leave it alone for a little while. Once you've grabbed that extension and figured it, let's do stuff. So down in the bottom right-hand corner where it says plain text, and I appreciate we probably can't see that very well on this screen, you click that, and then at the top, there's a little prompt which will appear. And you select which language you're going to be scripting or typing in, and we're going to choose PowerShell, of course. And that then provides us not only with PowerShell IntelliSense and code markup, coloring, and all that fantastic stuff, but it'll also start a PowerShell session for us at the bottom. Things with it, now that we've got PowerShell on our client computer. Help, because the very first thing you do when you run PowerShell is update help. It takes a little while, probably produces an error message. Yep, there's the error message. And then we can use CLS to clear what's on the screen. So let's do get help on AD computer. So this is going to provide examples and all the fantastic things that we can do with get AD computer. So let's find some computers. Click on that row, hit F8, and it's produced us a list of our computers. Now let's get a CSV of those computers. Here's a CSV of our computers stored in AD. Absolutely fantastic. Get member. Get member will expose some more of the details that's stored in those objects. So we can see distinguished name, DNS host, if that's enabled or not, what the SID is. We can see all these little properties which are stored inside those objects. And we can also use one which is out grid view, which will kick out a grid view. Yeah, grid view. Fantastic. You can use the grid views to do things like, well, select multiple computers and then press OK, and it will go and run another command against those computers. The PowerShell is fantastically discoverable. Get minus help. Space, star, put something in the middle that you want to know more about. If you want to know more about DHCP, star DHCP, star. It will give you a list of all the modules, all the scripts that you can run to do with DHCP. So, because we like to do things fast, there are a couple of keyboard shortcuts which I think you should know. Control and space invokes IntelliSense. IntelliSense is that drop down which will tell you more about what you can type in this place. So if you type get minus AD, control and space, and that will give you all the modules, all the commands that you can run with get-AD. Equally so, when you start putting brackets, braces, whatever you want to call them in there, you can expand and collapse them all across the entire document with Control and K. Keep pressing and holding the Control key and then press 0. It will collapse them. Or J to expand them. Word wrap toggle, Alt and Z, all these useful little commands which are just good to know for Visual Studio Code. And these apply across all the different scripting languages in Visual Studio. For example, I've pressed Control and space. It's given me a small little snippet of the do until command. I type some more text in there. I press Control J0. It collapses. I press Control K J, and it expands. Fantastic. So, PowerShell is completely useless until you start using it to make tools. Who's played Portal 2? Fantastic. We all heard that one then. Good. Make some tools with PowerShell. So, when you go back to your institutions on Monday, hopefully not tomorrow, start thinking about what are the things which you do administratively on a very regular basis that you would like to make simpler. We've got loads of little commands. One of the ones that I'm going to show you a little bit later is just to create and then potentially delete test virtual machines, which have a common naming convention, which when they're deleted, delete them not only from Hyper-V, but also from Active Directory. Think about the tools that you would want to use on a regular basis that will make your life easier. Do those first. Don't think about making a tool which is going to be 400 lines long, which is going to update your Windows servers, reboot them, move them over to another virtual machine, move them back, test that everything went okay, test Active Directory throughout the entire thing, because I did that and it took about 2 months. Think about the tools which you can use. Tools are typically stored in functions. We've got a simple function here which will tell us the time. Now with PowerShell, if you go to your Documents folder and create a folder in there called Windows PowerShell, another subfolder called Modules, and another subfolder in there with the same name of your function, and then save your function in there with a PSM1 extension, that will load your function into PowerShell every time it launches, making it very easy to discover that function at a later date. So after reloading PowerShell, I can now type Kings, Control and space for IntelliSense, get time, and it's produced into the prompts there the current time. Yeah. So by putting your functions into this folder, they will load straight up for you. Now, using a prefix like Kings, we use QC. That is completely against every single best practice on the planet. Don't do that. I do it because it makes my life easier, and I quite like that. So, how we have it set up at Queen's. There's a folder for modules, so as we've discussed already. There's a folder for scripts, that's just general dumping ground for scripts that we use on a common basis. There's a folder for snippets. So snippets are pieces of text that you're going to insert into your functions, your scripts, that will enable you to do something. So we've got one which is a function laid out with the help text at the top, the parameters, a couple of the common ones that we use most obviously or regularly in there as well. There's also 2 other files in there, profile.ps1. Now, whenever you launch a PowerShell Interactive Console, that profile.ps1 file will also run. That enables you to do fun and interesting things like copy these scripts down from a central repository, be that GitHub or something else that you might use. We just use a file share and put them into this folder. So for our modules folder at Queen's, this is how it looks. We've got all these fantastic modules which we use on a very regular basis. Let's see if I can zoom in on this without breaking everyone's heads. There we go. So we've got the ones that we use for OpenVAS and for Simper, which I made. I've got the one for delete virtual machines, get clients, all kinds of fun and interesting things. So the script which copies everything down from our central store looks something like this. There's also some text in there which says, I've copied something in new. You could put some text in there which says, good morning, Dave. What would you like to do today? Or whatever you want to be called. So a couple of the scripts which we use at Queen's which really saves us time. One of them is the new contractor MAC address. So we have a script which will enable us, after being prompted for the MAC address, forename, surname, company name, description, email address, how many days we want it to be valid, and what network to put the person in, that when we have a contractor visit, I take these details off them, I plug them into the script, and they can then go and plug into any of our network ports, and they'll get into the appropriate network. PowerShell uses common programming terms like a switch. In this case, it will take something nice like internet access only VLAN 11 and convert that into another value. In this case, the network or security group ID. So another script that we use, in this case, is going to set the primary group of something inside AD. Pretty much anything that you can talk to programmatically, you can use PowerShell to do. This is an SQL query. So in this case, there's two little parameters being asked there, one MAC address and one how many results to return. And there's the TSQL, which goes and runs against an SQL server. You can really use PowerShell to talk to anything. Another one, the Windows Event Viewer. This very simple, very short script queries the event viewer on one of our servers and returns the most recent print events, 50 of them actually. Anything you can talk to that's in Windows, you can talk to with PowerShell. This is the one which creates a new virtual machine and then deletes it once I'm bored with it. So QC new -test VM, press enter, it asks what do I want to call it. I'm going to call it cheese. It goes and creates that virtual machine, creates a virtual disk for it, connects it to the network with some common properties which I use on a regular basis. There's my virtual machine. I now want to delete it. I run the delete virtual machine, it pops up a little window. Here's the two virtual machines which I've got, which are named test. I'm going to delete the one that says cheese. I'm going to press enter. Goes and deletes its virtual hard disk, deletes the virtual machine, says, hey, do you want to remove this from AD as well? I press on for life. Now I know you can use cloning and right-click in your funky VMware consoles and do stuff, and it makes it very nice. But here I typed in a name and I had a virtual machine, and then I said delete it and it was gone. Really, absolutely anything you want to talk to, you can do with it. Another one which tests DNS servers, because of course we have our own internal DNS and then we have public DNS. If I want to very quickly get the IP addresses of a host name and query multiple servers, I just plug them in. Another one which backs up network switches. Shameless plug for blog, by the way. If you've got HPE network switches, please go do this. Back up your switches, it's really good for you. In this case, it talks to the dynamic link libraries of WinSCP. So if you use WinSCP already, you can use PowerShell to talk to WinSCP and back up your network switches. Are we all bored of me talking about PowerShell? Yeah, or are we getting the idea that it's really good and you can use it to do anything? Fantastic. So running your scripts as tasks. Once you get to the stage where we're no longer just doing little things like getting the time, we now want to do things on a regular basis. Have a server, be it virtual or physical or whatever you want to do, and spin up an absolute truckload of scheduled tasks on that machine. This is a really good and really simple way of getting your scripts to run automatically. We've got ones in there that do things like create AD accounts based upon the data that we get from the university. Emails us backup reports. I've got one there where we created an RSS reader and it creates tickets in our help desk when new things appear in RSS feeds. That way they've become actionable items, not just emails which I arrive and then delete. for those scripts, if you're on Windows Server 2012 or higher, all you need to do for the program or script is call PowerShell, and then for the arguments, put in the path to your script. Please make sure that your script doesn't require any interactive elements to run, and also make sure that you use complete paths in your scripts. Just makes life easier for these things. So, in IT, we have the wonderful thing of let's steal everything from everyone else. The best place to do that for PowerShell is the PowerShell Gallery. The PowerShell Gallery is a Microsoft-created list which has community contributions in it for modules that people have written to interact with common services. When I did this presentation back in December, there were 2,595 unique items in there. Now we're fast forwarding to March, there's 3,006, of which 2 I contributed. Good number. The 2 which I've done, if you run simple mailing lists, you can go and download the module for that and automate your simple mailing lists. Equally so, we use OpenVAS to pen test our systems, both internal and external. There's one there to manage OpenVAS through PowerShell. Other ones which people have contributed to manage MySQL servers, VMware, it's all in there. Don't go and make your own things if you can steal it off someone else. That's the way to do it in IT. So let's get back round to managing our print server. We've got 9 minutes left on the clock. Who's seen the oatmeal? Comics? No? Why printers are sent from hell? It's really good. Go buy the poster, it's $20. So, remote install of our print server. We're here on our client PC. We're going to use invoke -command -computer name. We've got Kings -print1 as the computer we're going to execute this against, and then script block. Plug in whatever you want the server to do. In this case, add Windows feature. Notice how we've got IntelliSense running there. And I'm going to install the print server role on that server. F5 to execute, and it goes and installs the role on the server. Once you've done that, don't forget to start the print server role, or the print server spooler. I was there for minutes wondering, why can't I create new printers on this server? Well, the print spooler isn't turned on by default, and yeah, you have to do that. So please remember to do that. Again, we can do that with an invoke command. Start service to start it in the first place, and set service to make a configuration change to that service. Now again, with PowerShell, we're looking to make things consistent and repeatable. Who hates printers? Good. So let's make them consistent and repeatable. To do that, we have a script which calls the HP Universal Print Driver installer and sets the printer up on our server in a nice and consistent manner. At the very top of the script here, we've got the server which we're going to run the script against. We've got the IP address, we've got the location. We use the naming sequence of location, the maximum size paper it will take, and then if it's color or black and white. That then goes and runs some fun and interesting things, which in turn kicks off the creation of the printer port on that server, installs the printer on the server, and then shares it out. The result of running this script, which takes a minute or less, is a nice, consistently set up printer. Well, isn't that fantastic? If you're deploying 100 new printers, you know all their IP addresses, just go and run this against all those IP addresses. An hour and you're done, maybe. Are we all happy so far? Good. So we're going to go a little bit off-piste for a couple of minutes. Microsoft Project Honolulu. Who's heard of this? Oh, you guys have got to check their RSS feeds and stuff from Microsoft on a more regular basis. This is a GUI management tool for managing your servers which are headless. So yes, we have MMC. Yes, we have Server Manager on these fantastic tools. This is what Microsoft are calling the future. The technical preview out at the moment allows a very small subset of features, but I would suggest you go and play with Project Honolulu. It allows you to add your computers to the management console and then see things like, I don't know, Windows Update, Windows Firewall on that machine, and also execute PowerShell scripts against those machines from an HTML5 interface. Now, isn't that better than the old MMC style plugin Server Manager? Because it's just a website, you could also install this on a so-called gateway server, publish the ports through your firewall, and have the ability to manage your servers from the internet. Or don't do that and do what everyone really does and sets up a VPN, has this inside your network, never publish it to the firewall, and you just VPN to it. Isn't that even better? There we have PowerShell in an HTML5 web console. It does prompt for password unless you set up delegation, all these other funky things. But there are these tools are being developed for Microsoft, and the release version is coming with Windows Server 2019, apparently, which is coming later this year. Isn't that good? Maybe. It's free in the sense that, of course, you still have to run it against Windows servers, which hopefully you paid for. It can manage everything down to Windows Server 2012, and also it's got client management tools in there as well. So your Windows 10 clients you can manage through this too. This is how Microsoft suggests you set up the infrastructure for it, at least on their website. Do whatever you like. Just install it on one of your client PCs, your management computer. Start pointing against some of your servers and see how you can manage your servers through an HTML5 interface and also have a PowerShell access to that. Imagine doing this on your phone, PowerShell on your phone. Wouldn't that be great? So we are coming up to time. I'm not going to go through the other fun things to try and say further reading. Any final questions? Because we're now at 12:29. Are we all bored stiff? So the advantage of headless is it has a smaller attack surface in the first place. So a couple of years ago, I remember a vulnerability that was discovered, including in Windows Server, for the Windows Mail client. That was installed as part of the GUI tools on that server. Microsoft found a vulnerability with this DLL, which was still there, still accessible, which would allow you root access to the machine. The headless client never had that DLL on there. The other nice thing is, as I was saying earlier, no GUI, no fun buttons to push and break things with. So if I am to believe HP and Dell and everything they're saying, the most common cause of server outages at the moment is human error, because we humans like to play with things. So why don't we build tools which talk to headless servers, which operate in a nice and consistent fashion, instead of having buttons to play with? Isn't that even better? So the main advantage that I see is reduced attack surface. It boots faster, it patches faster, and reduced attack surface. Yeah, reduced attack surface. Did I mention that? Anyone else? Thank you all for coming. My World of IT, this will be online in the next couple of days, assuming it picked up all the wonderful audio. And thank you very much for coming, guys. Off you go.